Coming up next on Legislative Year in Review.
We all want to go home. I'm really thankful that we've gotten to the place where we can go home with a budget that represents the values of the entire state.
The state operating budget.
Take a little bit of time, you get into the back of it, and you find the budget bloopers. The things that you really wonder, why does anybody in government spend money on?
Plus,
with censorship in the United States of America, this is the second highest year in many years for measles, 632 confirmed cases.
No issue is bigger during the 2019 session than vaccinations.
And some of the comments that were made saying that people are trying to weaponize their children are absolutely reprehensible.
And
the Washington College Grant will ensure every qualified Washingtonian can achieve their dream of a college education, regardless of their income.
New taxation legislation gets a mixed response from the legislature.
With this tax, a 20% tax on gross revenues, that ends up being about a 33% cut to their bottom line profit in a given year.
We should pay. It's an investment in the state of Washington. We can afford it. We should pay this tax.
Thank you for watching Legislative Year in Review 2019. I'm your host, Dave Martinson. The 2019 legislative session has concluded, and now it's time to look back. Every 2 years, legislators have to create a 2-year state budget, and that was a primary concern for lawmakers as budgets were introduced, crafted, and negotiated into the financial plan for our state moving forward. Another major occurrence of the session involved Democratic Governor Jay Inslee, who has tried for years to advance various environmental bills only to see the legislation stymied. However, this session, he finally found success with a key clean energy proposal. For this show, we will review our coverage of what has truly been a session to remember. We start off with state budgets. The 2019 through 21 state operating budget was a source of a lot of intrigue as it evolved from proposals from the House and Senate to become what will be adopted as the state's biennial budget to fund core government services, K-12 and higher education, as well as behavioral health services. The $52.4 billion operating budget includes $27.2 billion towards public schools, $10.1 billion for human services, $4 billion towards higher education, $136 million towards the Department of Natural Resources in a year in which there have already been 50 wildfires in Washington, and $111 million for the Washington State Patrol. The budget also includes $6.3 billion for the Department of Social and Health Services. It's worth noting that $829 million of the $6.3 billion is earmarked for mental health care, which was a focus of the 2019 session. The funds will be spent in part to include bed and other upgrades at Western and Eastern state hospitals. On the last day of the session, the budget bill was debated in the Senate and House. We begin on the floor of the Senate on April 28th. Chair of the Senate Ways and Means Committee, 23rd District, Democratic Senator Christine Rolfes, highlighted provisions she supported in the budget bill.
We all want to go home. I'm really thankful that we've gotten to the place where we can go home with a budget that represents the values of the entire state. When we got here, we said, and I think everybody said, we want to finish our obligation to K-12 education, particularly with special education. And we did a bang-up job doing that. We worked together to reform the behavioral health system in this state. We committed the resources that we need to commit to try to put an end to the catastrophic wildfires that have been ravaging our state from corner to corner at this point.
9th District Republican Senator Mark Schessler rose with a lot of concerns about the proposed budget.
Take a little bit of time, you get into the back of it, and you find the budget bloopers. The things that you really wonder, why does anybody in government spend money on? Snake River Dam removal, it's a federal issue. We spend money on it. Establish an environmental justice task force in the budget because we couldn't pass the bill. We have yet another study, dollars for a state bank, yet again. We spend more money on executive protection in Iowa, New Hampshire, and other states. We give that office 39% increase again. It's a lot of money. We raid the accident Medicaid account to implement clean energy programs on page 14. This is the funds that we pay in as employers to protect injured workers. And it goes on and on, Mr. President, and it's paid for with new and higher taxes. Thank you.
Next, the debate took place the same evening on the floor of the House. 3rd District Democratic Representative Tim Ormsby indicated the budget is about people.
We will think of this thing, and it will be written about as money, spending, dollars. But the real currency in this budget is people. Our resources are human. This is a budget from people, about people, to people that live in this state and require services.
7th District Republican Representative Jacqueline Maycumber raised concerns about how the budget bill was negotiated.
This budget was developed in the dark of the night, on the 104th day, without transparency. You think we would learn our lesson by not making sure the public could even have a chance to read the 900 pages. This was not transparent. It was written in the dark of the night, Madam Speaker. I urge a no vote.
In addition to the operating budget, the capital and transportation budgets were major parts of the 2019 session. The capital budget totals $4.9 billion in new capital appropriations for the 2019 through 21 biennium. The budget will fund capital projects such as K-12 school construction, higher education improvements, and even the creation of a new facility in Tumwater that will house the state archives. The state transportation budget was passed in the last days of the session. In gross, substitute House Bill 1160 provided a transportation budget of $9.8 billion for the 2019 through 21 biennium. Making a lot of headlines in the budget at the end of the session was the $37 million the transportation budget will invest in the creation of a project office and pre-design work for an eventual I-5 Columbia River Bridge between Vancouver, Washington and Portland, Oregon. Next up, vaccinations. An outbreak of measles in southwest Washington led to hundreds of concerned citizens heading to Olympia to testify, as the question of a vaccine requirement proved to have very strong opinions on both sides. The bill that passed the legislature, engrossed House Bill 1638, would remove the philosophical exemption to the MMR vaccine. Under the provisions of EHB 1638, a child may not attend the first day of daycare or a public or private school without providing proof of full immunization and compliance with an immunization schedule or a certificate of exemption. Exemptions outlined in EHB 1638 include a religious objection, proof of disease immunity through lab evidence or history, and having a parent or sibling with a history of immune system problems or negative vaccine reactions. The bill also requires vaccinations for child daycare workers and volunteers. We look back at an April 23rd debate on the legislation. 17th District Republican Representative Paul Harris sponsored the bill.
Clark County had 72 confirmed cases of measles. With censorship in the United States of America, this is the second highest year in many years for measles, 632 confirmed cases. I concur with what the Senate did. They made this bill better, and I would ask for concurrence of this House.
49th District Democratic Representative Monica Stonier rose in support of the bill, seeing it as a positive step forward.
As stewards of tax dollars and not only tax dollars to our public health providers at the county level, but also recognizing how much money we invest in K-12 education and the disruption that this outbreak has provided or has caused in our schools, we are proud supporters on this side of this bill. Thank you.
17th District Republican Representative Vicki Kraft rose in strong opposition to the bill, expressing concerns about statistics.
Mr. Speaker, I also find troubling as a Clark County legislator that the statistic of 78% IIS immunization information system, which continues to be quoted by supporters of this bill, along with Washington State Department of Health and Clark County public official Dr. Melnick. They keep saying that there's only a 78% vaccination rate in Clark County. That's false. That data comes from a voluntary system, and none, not one, of the Clark County school districts report into it. How could it possibly be accurate? It's not. From the school reports, the certificate of immunization system that the certificate that the schools are required to receive upon a student coming into the system, there's a 93.2% vaccination rate for sixth graders as of this November 2018.
4th District Republican Representative Matt Shea rose in opposition to the legislation, speaking about vaccination lawsuit settlements.
And some of the comments that were made saying that people are trying to weaponize their children are absolutely reprehensible. $4 billion had been paid out in vaccine injury in this country. $4 billion. I challenge anybody in this chamber to name one industry that has had to pay that much out where we haven't given people a choice.
Mr. Speaker, there are 56 yeas, 40 nays, 2 excused.
Having received the constitutional majority engrossed, House Bill 1638 as amended by the Senate is declared passed.
The bill will go into effect 90 days after the adjournment of the legislative session, which occurred at the end of April. Coming on strong at the end of the legislative session was Initiative 1000, an initiative to the legislature related to affirmative action. For our coverage of I-1000, we take you to a packed House committee hearing.
I'm calling the House Civil Rights and Judiciary and Senate State Government, Tribal Relations and Elections Committee to order this morning.
On April 18th, the joint House Civil Rights and Judiciary, as well as Senate State Government, Tribal Relations and Elections Committee held a public hearing on Initiative 1000. If passed, the initiative would modify current law that prohibits the state from discriminating against or granting preferential treatment to an individual or group based upon certain characteristics in public employment, public education, and public contracting. The initiative would allow the state to implement affirmative action laws that don't include quotas or constitute preferential treatment. Per funding in the governor's biennial budget, the initiative would create the Governor's Commission on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Nathaniel Jackson, citizen sponsor of Initiative 1000, indicated the initiative is about fairness.
I-1000 does no favors. It does not yield a favor, the playing field in anybody's favor, but it tries to make it a little less tilted. Keep in mind, we said no quotas, no preferential treatment. We have never had set-asides. We have never had quotas in this state at any time. And every individual must be qualified. What we want to do is be fair.
Concerned citizen John Carlson expressed opposition to Initiative 1000.
This initiative can be summed up in a single sentence. I-1000 would abolish the standard of equality for all, regardless of race, as required by I-200, and replace it with a system that uses different rules for people of different races, where students applying for a college education are treated not as individual Americans, but as representatives of different races. That is, of course, divisive. It's inherently divisive. It's wrong. It's nothing but diversity by discrimination.
Former Washington Governor Gary Locke testified in support of the initiative from his point of view.
I, as a person of color, was recruited to attend Yale, but I still had to pass the same tests. I still had to meet the qualifications of the students entering into Yale. As a person of color, I don't want to be admitted or given a job because I'm lesser qualified. I have pride in myself. I want to believe that I can cut the mustard and perform like anyone else, but give me a chance. And for a lot of people, they don't even know about some of these programs or opportunities that are available to them, or the jobs that might be there, or the contracting opportunities that might be there. Initiative 1000 simply clarifies and removes that ambiguity that recruitment, outreach efforts, publicity efforts are clearly allowed. But people still have to get the job on their own, have to be admitted to the university or college on their own merits, have to pass the test, meet the qualifications without any lowering of the standards. That's all people want.
Concerned citizen Sharon Hannock testified in opposition to the bill, expressing business-related concerns.
as an accountant and representing business owners. What this bill will do is expand the practices in hiring. It will mean that a small business owner will have to do specific outreach just to fill out a government checklist to say that we covered all our bases so that they won't get lawsuits against them. So I'm very concerned that what you are doing in the expansion of I-1000 is going to detrimentally hurt businesses, small businesses, and anyone with government contracts. We need to be hiring people on merit. We need to be having children get good grades to get into schools. And that is the sole thing, not what they look like. Thank you.
The legislation ended up passing the Senate on the last day of the session, after which chaos ensued.
Mr. President, there are 26 yea, 22 nay, 1 excused.
Having received a constitutional majority, the Senate will come to order. Senate will come to order. Having received a constitutional majority, Senate Initiative 1000 is declared passed. The title of the bill will be the title of the act. The Sergeant at Arms will clear the galleries. Sergeant at Arms will clear the galleries. Senate will go temporarily at ease.
It's going to feel really good to make history this year for clean energy in the state of Washington.
We switch gears to the governor. For Democratic Governor Jay Inslee, it was a session in which one of his environmental proposals moved forward. Governor Inslee has made efforts to advance clean energy legislation in the past. However, in the 2019 session, one in which he decided to run for president, and Gross' second substitute House Bill 5116 is headed to the finish line at his desk. We take a look back at the legislation as debated on April 11th. The legislation requires electric utilities to stop using coal-fired resources by the end of 2025, to only sell greenhouse gas neutral electricity to Washington customers by 2030, and creates the policy of 100% renewable and non-emitting sales of electricity to Washington customers by 2045. 36th District Democratic Representative Gail Tarleton, who sponsored the companion to this bill in the House, indicated the challenges associated with enacting this type of legislation.
I'm reminded of the favorite saying of my aunt, all things are difficult before they are easy. Moving our state to a clean energy future, where clean, affordable, and reliable energy is available to all of the people of Washington State as we grow, is one of the largest challenges I have ever undertaken in my career. And I've undertaken a few.
20th District Republican Representative Richard DeBolt indicated that reducing wildfire fumes is a key to a cleaner environment.
There's a couple things in the bill that have an issue for me, and one is carbon now. Reduce carbon now. If you want to reduce carbon now, we need to do something about forest fire management. We believe that we can do that. We believe we can monetize it. We believe we can capture it. We believe that we can put the formulary in place. It's not sexy. It's not 100% clean. It's reduction of 8 million tons of carbon in the atmosphere in Washington State last year if we did it, 80 million in the last 10 years. But it's not sexy, but it is effective.
34th District Democratic Representative Joe Fitzgibbon rose in support of the bill, looking ahead to the future.
So I'm very proud of the work product here today. I'm very proud of the members of this chamber for the respectful debate, as well as for the real ambition that we are showing as a body and that we are showing as a state in meeting the needs of future generations, as well as the needs of disproportionately impacted communities, the needs of workers as we transition into a clean energy future.
18th District Republican Representative Brandon Vick rose in opposition to the legislation, indicating difficulties with measuring the standards set forth in the bill.
We might be able to figure out how many metric tons of carbon are coming out of Washington at the end of